Are you trying to design a logo for yourself, your business, your church, or nonprofit? Or maybe you are a creative who's wanting to get paid for your creativity by selling logo designs to other people, to other businesses, to other organizations. Either way, in this video, we're going to be unpacking the 4-part framework that we use for every single brand that we build, every single logo that we design. So by the end of this video, you're going to have a very clear roadmap on how to design a logo that's communicating the right things about a brand and not the wrong things. Okay, so the fact is every single part of a brand, or at least a visual brand, communicates something about the organization. The colors that you choose, the typography that you use, the iconography, all of it is actually communicating something. And too often people are communicating the wrong things about their businesses and churches and nonprofits instead of the right things. And so we want to make sure that we're actually communicating the right things about our brands with the colors, fonts, iconography that we choose. That's the first step. Before we do anything else, we want to make sure that we're actually really clear on what we're trying to communicate and articulate with our logo and with our visual brand before we actually get into the 4-part framework of the logo design process. By the way, stay tuned to the end of the video. I'm going to be giving away 100 plus free icons that you can use for social media, for your website, for your marketing efforts. These are vector-based icons that you can use in Adobe Illustrator. So again, stay tuned for that at the very end of the video. Okay, so logo design. We talked about the importance of logo design and how really all of the different elements of the visual brand communicate something about the organization. So the first step in the logo design process, the 4-part framework that we use to build every single logo design that we do, is inspiration. We want to be inspired. Now, this is not cheating. This is not copying somebody else, being inspired to the point where it's plagiarism. But what we are wanting to do is actually see what else is out there. This is basically the market research component. So some really great tools. Of course, Google is an obvious contender for a way to kind of see what else is out there in terms of logo designs in a specific industry. So if I was designing a logo for a coffee shop, for instance, I might go to Google and type in coffee shop logos or trendy coffee shop logos or hipster coffee shop logos or whatever kind of coffee shop logo or visual brand that you're trying to build or create. So Google can be a great tool for kind of seeing what else is out there in terms of market research. Another contender for an option for kind of seeing what else is out there for specific types of logos and genres of logos is Dribbble.com. Dribbble.com is basically a portfolio site. So when somebody designs a logo for a specific industry, or even aside from logo design, it could be any sort of print design project or illustration, they upload it to Dribbble.com. But you can basically search in the search bar certain keywords, and that's another way to kind of get inspired, see what else is out there. And really in this part of the process, what you're really trying to do is see, is there anything that kind of sticks out to me in terms of trends in the industry? Is there certain colors that are being used more than other colors, certain types of typography or fonts that are typically used in this industry versus a different one? For instance, if you are designing a logo for a law firm, you probably wouldn't want it to have the same colors and fonts as a daycare logo. And if you're designing a logo for a daycare, it would be pretty boring if it looked like it could also belong to a law firm. So again, it's important to be thinking through these things in terms of market research as we're thinking through fonts, colors, typefaces, and iconography. But again, Google is a great tool for this, Dribbble.com. There's others as well. But basically, you're saying what else is out there? Are there certain colors, fonts that kind of stick out to you? And then in terms of even just the ideas for the logo, the iconography, this is a great place to kind of get inspired for that as well. Again, we're not copying, we're not plagiarizing. We're just saying what else is out there and getting inspired. Okay, so we just talked about inspiration. The second part of the 4-part framework for building a logo design that's actually communicating the right things about your brand is ideation. So this is the fun part. This is probably where most of the creative juices are going to be flowing, where most of the work is going to come in. We're not touching a computer yet. You're not going to a keypad, but basically this is where you are just kind of jotting down ideas. You're scribbling, you're doodling, you're coming up with any kind of iconography that you can. I usually recommend coming up with 4 or even maybe 5 different concepts on a piece of paper. One really great pro tip is to use dotted graph paper. So Field Notes has some really great journals that have dots kind of built into them. But basically, this is going to help you to make sure that your lines are actually straight lines, that there's no curvature. And that's just going to make your building process, your design ideation process that much more smooth. So again, we start with this idea of inspiration, getting inspired, doing market research. And then from there, we flow into the second part, which is ideation. So at this point, you probably have a journal full of several different concepts, different ideas that you've kind of doodled on your journal. And so now we're ready for the third part of the 4-part framework, which is implementation. So now we're actually going to open up our laptops. We're going to go to Adobe Illustrator. And this is where you're actually going to enter text boxes and you're going to try different typefaces and different fonts. Remember to think through typefaces carefully because, again, you don't want it to be too playful of a font or a logo if it's a more serious industry, if it's something that should feel more elegant or more academic or more prestigious, and then vice versa. So there's different types of typefaces. There are serif typefaces, which have serifs on them, which typically do feel more academic, more elegant, more prestigious. There's sans serif typefaces, which might work really well for tech companies, or if you're just wanting your logo to kind of feel more modern or sleek or up to date. But regardless, this is where you're actually putting text blocks and text boxes in Adobe Illustrator. By the way, I would recommend Adobe Illustrator if you're designing a logo. There's also Photoshop, there's InDesign, there's several different design programs. While Photoshop is a great tool for moving background images, creating social media graphics, and several other things, I wouldn't recommend it for logo design. So there's basically two different types of image processing in the design world. There's raster-based and then there's vector-based. So Photoshop uses raster-based, which basically just means it uses pixels. So if you were designing something in Photoshop and you zoomed in and zoomed in and zoomed in, the more you zoom in, the more pixelation you're going to see. And when you're designing a brand or designing a logo, you want to use something that uses vector-based programming, which basically just means there's no pixels. You're using live paths and live lines. So you can basically zoom in on the iconography or the typography in your logo infinitely, and you'll never see one pixel. So again, for logo design, I would recommend using Adobe Illustrator as the software of choice. So now that we're in the implementation part of the 4-part framework, the next step is creating the assets that you need. So for instance, if you're creating a logo design for a coffee company, you probably need the iconography of a coffee cup. There's a few different ways to do this. One way is to actually create the shape organically or from scratch. You can do this by using the different shape tools like the line tool or the square tool or the circle tool, and basically just creating anchor points and then moving those points around to different places until you have the desired shape. So that's one way to do it. I would say it's probably the most time-consuming way, but it does give you the most original image at the end of the process. Another thing that you can do, and again, this isn't cheating, but it's just kind of using resources at your disposal, is using a website like freepik.com. It's FREEPIK. And this is basically, they have royalty-free iconography that you can use. So for instance, if you go to freepik.com, you can type in coffee cup logo or coffee cup vector or coffee cup icon, and you can just find one that already exists. I believe if you are a free user, you have to attribute Freepik if you use their services or use any of their artwork. But if you have a premium membership, which honestly doesn't cost much and it's worth it if you're going to be doing this often, then you don't have to attribute. But even if you don't have to attribute, I still recommend changing things up so it's not exactly like an icon that is already on Freepik for a couple of different reasons, especially if this is a logo design. You don't want to have the same iconography in your logo or your client's logo and somebody else's logo as well. And so the best way to make sure that doesn't happen is changing it up. So you can basically run that free asset that you got from freepik.com through Adobe Illustrator, and then you can change the colors and you can kind of elongate it or stretch it. You can add anchor points or remove anchor points to kind of make the shape a little bit unique. You can round the edges, etc. So again, using Freepik or some resource like that to get royalty-free vector images as a starting point, I think that can be a great asset and a great resource, but I also would recommend changing them up, making them unique, just so that you have a unique one-of-a-kind design at the end of the process. So in this implementation part of the 4-part framework, we've already talked about typography. We've talked about iconography and how to create digital assets and iconography from scratch, and then also using some free resources. The next thing to kind of touch on briefly here is color and color palette. So colors, again, speak to us in different ways. They kind of communicate different things. Orange is usually a color that is associated with something that's affordable. So if you're trying to do something like really affordable trash pickup service or something like that, orange might be a good color to use. If you're trying to do something high-end and kind of sophisticated for your visual brand, orange is probably not the way to go. You might want to go with something more like blacks and golds that kind of feels a little bit more upscale and a little bit more prestigious. But again, think through color. This is really where that inspiration part of the process at the very beginning might come in handy to just kind of reference some of those different logos and images that you were inspired by, just to kind of see, hey, what color palettes kind of speak to me and speak to our brand. And then from there, now that you have the assets designed, the typography picked out in Adobe Illustrator for your logo, now you can try making the text one color, making the iconography a different color, and then honestly, even just having 4 or 5 different versions with different color palettes that you can kind of compare side by side and get feedback from people that you trust. That's a great way to decide on a color palette for your visual brand. Okay, so we've talked through inspiration, we've talked through ideation, implementation. The fourth and final part of the logo design process is presentation. Now, don't skip this part. It seems like the logo design process is over, but it's not. Presentation is a big part of it. This is basically mocking the logo up. If you are designing logos for for other people, this is especially important, but even for yourself, just to see what does that logo actually look like on a t-shirt or a business card or a sign or a truck or a vehicle wrap. It's going to help you to make sure that you're actually designing it with those different applications in mind. For instance, maybe you design the logo to have all the text on one line, but as soon as you put it on a vehicle wrap or a truck wrap or something like that, you notice that the text is too small because your name of your business or your brand is too long. And so breaking it up into 2 lines might make more sense. And so sometimes we don't actually know these things and how it's going to actually interact with different elements or different applications till we actually mock it up. So again, mock-ups are a great tool just to kind of see what the logo and visual brand is actually going to look like and feel like in various applications once it's actually printed. But if you're an agency that's designing a logo for somebody else, mock-ups can help to close the deal and close the sale and basically kind of move the process along, because it's a lot more impressive to actually see the logo, not just on a computer screen, but actually to see it on a t-shirt or on some print collateral or in a marketing campaign. So again, mock-ups are a great tool. There's a few different places you can go for these. You can even design your own mock-ups. It's a little bit more of an elaborate process to do that. But basically you can, just Google free Photoshop mock-ups or free PSD mock-ups or something like that. You can also use subscription services. One really great one is placeit.net. Basically they have thousands of mock-ups. I think it's a $15 a month or $10 a month or something like that. I don't remember exactly. But basically they have thousands of mock-ups. So if you wanted to mock up your new coffee shop logo on a sign or a t-shirt or a hat or something like that, you can do so easily. You can kind of move it around. You can resize it to make it bigger or smaller on the shirt or the hoodie. And so again, placeit.net's a great tool. There's lots of websites like that. But regardless, presentation's a big part of the process, mocking it up to see what it's actually going to look like in various applications. So there you have it, the 4-part framework that we use for every logo that we design, every brand that we build. We start with inspiration, we get inspired, and then we go to ideation, we come up with ideas and different concepts and directions for the logo. Then we go to implementation, where we're actually implementing these different ideas, choosing fonts and colors and typefaces and all the rest in Adobe Illustrator. And then from there, we mock it up. This is the presentation and the final part of the process for designing a logo that's actually communicating the right things about a brand and not the wrong things. Well, hey, thanks so much for sticking around to the end of the video. As promised, I would love to offer you our icon pack of 100 plus free royalty-free icons that you can use for social media, for your website, for your marketing efforts. These are vector-based. So basically, if you have the Adobe Illustrator app on your computer, then you can run these through Adobe Illustrator. You can kind of warp them and change them and add anchor points, customize them. You can change the colors. So again, this is 100 plus free icons that you can use for anything related to your marketing efforts. Hopefully that's a valuable asset for you. All you have to do is go to richie-creative.com/icons, and you can instantly get access to these free icons to use in your marketing efforts. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you haven't already, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the channel so that you're notified when new training content comes out. Thanks for watching. Remember, you can't use up creativity. The more you use, the more you have. Stay creative, and we'll catch you next time.